Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. This is the Comprehensivist Wednesday that we do in collaboration with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. On 2 Wednesdays of the month, we focus on CJ Fearnley's book. And today, the chapter is the fundamental role of story in our lives. The format, I'm going to invite everybody to talk about what they thought of the essay. Only 2 minutes each. Then I'm going to invite people to make any presentation related to the essay for up to about 5 minutes each. And then we're going to have a little bit of Q&A immediately after each of the presentations. After all the presentations are done, we're going to go ahead and have a general discussion. All right, so that's the plan. So let's start with comments on this particular chapter, the fundamental role of story in our lives. If you'd like to comment, go ahead and type an exclamation mark in chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Bob, if you're having audio problems, the easiest way to solve it is to leave and then come back. All right, who would like to go first? Anybody wants to say anything about stories and about the essay? We're going to start with Jeannie. Jeannie, go ahead. Jeannie, you're on mute.
Well, this is later on in the video, but I really was so intrigued by what Jeff, and I don't know his last name, but he's often on these, what he said about people telling their own story and how they think about their own story. Because I realized that this could actually be a kind of a therapy. So if you were always telling the story like, you know, like mommy loved you better or something, whatever the story was. I knew a guy who had the story that he was short, and he wasn't really short at all. But if you have the story, you could change the way you're making your own story, and then probably help yourself get over the thing that's hanging you up. So I was, just intrigued whether this is actually used in therapy, because you could even, bit by bit change the story. So, I mean, instead of saying mommy loved you better, you could start saying, mommy was more proud of you or something. And then, bit by bit, you could word by word change your whole story so that you weren't thinking like that anymore. Anyway, that was very intriguing to me.
Wonderful, thank you. I know that there is one psychologist that I really like. Her name is Magda Arnold. And she has written a whole book on story sequence analysis. I have the book, I've read parts of it, but she actually uses this as a tool for, she's actually based on work of Thomas Aquinas. So it's very, very interesting person. So I would recommend that book. Maritza, you're next.
Okay, so this is a topic kind of near and dear to me. So I loved participating in it the first time, and I went through and watched it again. And there's several different things that stood out to me, but I wrote down this quote. It's actually from Marina Warner, who CJ brings up several times throughout the discussion. And it says, stories build the important. Sorry, I wrote it wrong. Stories build the important but all important active ingredients of social values brought about by gradually evolving consensus. And they take little bits of our social values to make a story. I think that's just a fascinating thought, that it's that also with coupled with, there was an interaction in our last discussion together where somebody questioned CJ. They're like, you seem to be applying that there's no truth. I'm vehemently opposed to that. Is this what you're saying? And he told her no, but yes. But he said it, in a much more eloquent way. But the fascinating thing was he said, I'm open. And he said it with a smile. And it was just like, she said something, he started to answer and he stopped. And he said, I'm open. And to me, that's the heart of story that makes it fundamental. Stories allow us the room to build connections with either things that came before or things that are to the side of something we're doing. It gives the room for yes and I think that's just delightful. And so those are the couple little things that stand out to me from some of what CJ was talking about in this essay. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is going to be Katie. Katie, go ahead.
I read his essay and I loved his comment about children's books because, when you're a child, you read, they're pretty simple stories and they usually have illustrations to keep a kid interested. And then,
Go ahead.
I had distraction in the background. And then as an adult, the story becomes much more involved in a fiction book. So that's what I really liked about him, was to bring in the children piece. And I always joke with people, all I needed to know about dating I learned from Frog Prince, because the story is so simple, is that it can change over time. And then as an adult, in a novel, it's much more detailed, but the principles are there.
Thank you, Katie. All right, anybody else wants to comment on the essay? They are welcome to do so. Otherwise, we're going to go into presentations. Oh, wait a minute. Judy, go ahead.
Yes, hi. Real quick
Please take
observation. I love the essay. It was really wonderful to hear him again. Also, I saw the video. I had not been there the original day that he did it, but everything just made sense to me. I've always been a story lover, and so whatever the way that he dignified storytelling was just wonderful for me. And one place especially was when he said that he talked about wonder and wisdom, and that the questions we have should fill us with wonder. That part just hit me, because yes, stories along, the fireplace have hit us since time immemorial with wonder, so when seeing the stars and asking questions. So that part just spoke to me very, very directly. Everything spoke to me directly, but that was the main part.
Excellent. Thank you, Judy. Next up is Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm having difficulty with my mouse tonight. Hence the applaud appearing rather than the hand being raised. So I've only just managed to get time to read this essay, although it was quite a short essay. But it's full of insight, and I was very impressed by it, particularly about the fact that he's talking about where all of our life is a story. But for most people, when you say, I'm going to tell you a story, they assume it's going to be fiction. And to think of a story as being a non-fiction is a different way of thinking for me, which is, I think, is very powerful and could be used in many different scenarios.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. All right. So now we go to the next section, which is going to be presentations. So we're going to go, we'll start with Maritza. If Maritza has I don't know if you have a comment or you want to start the presentation.
But I just wanted to comment on something Brian just said. I'm sorry.
Please.
That was what my exclamation point was for. I wanted to he talked about the wonder coming up in the essay. I'm sorry, Judy talked about that, and the idea of, again, I like the way in which it was presented to us was this whole, it wasn't an invitation for us to view things as there being no truths. It was the invitation for us to view everything as a story and to allow for the possibility that another story exists for that same story that one has not yet heard. And I it's that something we do so often here, especially on Comprehensivist Wednesdays, right? The invitation to remain limber in our thinking and our perspectives. And I think that was, I really liked hearing the comments again in the essay, because I did listen to the actual event again, in addition to reading the essay. And it was just so many people did, just as Judy mentioned, so many people brought up the concept of wonder, and also a lot of people were, and Brian said that, most people think of fiction, and there was a little bit of static in our last discussion. There was some static where people didn't believe that there was no such thing as nonfiction. And I didn't comment in that one, so I wanted to bring it up here, this idea of, I think what I hear CJ saying when he says that there is no nonfiction, he's saying there is, like, even our nonfiction, it's a fiction, it's a story, because we cannot know that there is one truth. We're going to find ourselves with a nonfiction tale that, sure, we've done our utmost to ensure that it is as close to the reality that we can perceive as possible. And we have attempted to not violate certain things that we have collectively decided we're going to uphold as the definitions of certain things. But at the end of the day, it could be a story like gravity. We all of us accept for absolute fact that gravity exists, right? We don't walk around. I don't wonder if gravity is gonna fail on me from one step to the next. But it is a story that we've all accepted into our common vernacular, that gravity is, something that is non-changeable. And so I think that's kind of where he's getting at when he's saying to us that there's this we have a dissonance we hear when we hear that even nonfiction is fiction. But I think that's where he's getting at, that it's the wonder. If you're keeping your mind open and you're seeking wonder, you have to acknowledge that there's a chance for nonfiction to be actually fiction. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is Jeannie.
I wanted to comment on that comment. So the example that had been brought up was that a Star Trek episode wouldn't be the same as it was one of those ships they had a hard time getting back home. I forget what the number was, but they made a movie, and I guess they probably made a book in between. But at any rate, it's not that those two things are the same. No, but every time you choose a word, a description, you choose what to describe, what not to describe. Was there a panic aboard? There probably was, because they almost didn't make it. You may describe that and make one kind of story out of it, and you may not describe it and make it into a hero thing. So it's not that, you know, what's the reality is the same as you know, a total non-reality. It's that every time you're describing it through a story, you're choosing the words, you're choosing what to add to the story, what not to add to the story, and it makes a big, big difference how you do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Ginny. All right. Now we go to the next stage, that is going to be presentations. So what we're going to do, we're going to make a slight change in the format. After each presentation, comments by people, keep it under 1 minute, because anybody who presents, I would like people to get, I would like them to get feedback. If you have questions, something, but keep it very brief so we'll have time. If you'd like to make a presentation, go ahead and type a P or something, or present or something in the chat. We're going to start with Maritza, and then we'll be happy to have as many people who'd like to present on anything related to this theme of the fundamental role of story in our lives. Maritza, take it away.
Okay, so let me get started. I'm woefully very, very scattered today. Apologies. But I'm gonna share screen. I have a presentation. So I just realized I'm muttering and you guys can hear me. I'm gonna try again. So the fundamental role of story is the question. And I was left fairly convinced by the end of CJ's essay that yes, story is fundamental to us as human beings. I sort of believed that before, but I felt reaffirmed in discussing this with, you know, group of peers. What came to mind for me, and ever increasingly I think about often, is how we don't realize that we are either perpetuating a story that is incomplete or even entirely untrue, or on the flip side, how story enables something that would have died to live on. So my heritage, no surprise to any of you, I've mentioned, you know, I come from Puerto Rico. My family, culture, heritage, it's where I was raised, how I was raised. Now, the Puerto Ricans are but one Caribbean island in a grouping of Caribbean islands that were all discovered by Europeans, and they brought with them, you know, they brought conquering ways. And what happened when European settlers settled across all these various Caribbean nations, they put their demands and their culture onto this nation. And there was a point in history where many stories could have been lost, but the ingenuity of storytelling enabled them to live on. So we stand here today, you know, 500, 600 years later, and we know of these tales. So what I'm going to share with you is the role of Afro-Caribbean dances in cultural presentation. So I have a little slide. Okay, I have a couple slides for that. It's a little bit, little tiny bit disjointed, but hopefully not too terrible. I didn't have time to finesse it. So you're getting a little bit of a raw thing here. I'm going to supplant with a little chatter. Okay, so let me put the slide show. That didn't work. I'm sorry. Do that again.
Are you going to need the sound?
No, there will be no sound. That would have been smart. I am not that cool, Shrikant. Sorry. I only have words for you. Sadness, words and a few pictures. Okay. Oh, look, I didn't even start from the beginning. Do I have I do. Okay. So, myself, there are traditional Puerto Rican dances that I didn't know all the different stories that got in line behind them. So I'm learning these things myself, right? So I'm looking at it as dualistic nature is what I call it. So here, I'm saying Afro-Caribbean dances are not merely art forms. They are vital cultural expressions that preserve the stories of our ancestors. These dances reveal dualistic relationship between traditional African spiritual practices and Catholic religion imposed by colonial powers. So the dance was the repository of the knowledge. It was literally encoding experiences, emotions, and stories that were brought over. So the dance communicated stories from, ancestor to parent to child and so on. So when an enslaved people were attempted to be silenced, they closed their mouths but opened their limbs. They found a way to get their culture to push through. And so successfully, I might add, that I am only recently realizing how very similar some of our cultural, our more traditional dance is to other practices. So you guys may have heard about, you've heard about, almost everyone's heard of voodoo, right? Of voodoo. And so we have in the Spanish nations, we have Santeria, Espiritismo, and they're just aspects of spirituality. In general, the Caribbean nations don't consider these to be full religions. Fascinating thing, though, is that there are these dualistic concepts that go hand in hand, even so much like a little bit stronger in Cuba than in other areas, but you see it in all of them, including Puerto Rico. There's a actual religion that comes across the seas with the African slaves about the Oricha. Now, the Oricha themselves are not gods. They are very, very strong heralds for the gods. So they're like the saints of Catholicism. So when the enslaved people were told they had to throw away their ways and embrace the European Catholicism, they were willing to do so because they saw similarities with the saints. And not even if they were willing to do so, they determined which saints seemed to resemble their Oricha, and they interwove them. So when you hear somebody saying, "Oh, Santa Barbara, give me strength," Saint Barbara, that's the same thing as saying, "Chango, give me strength," because Saint Barbara and Chango are one and the same. In Cuba, they have started the custom of calling it the seven powers. In Spanish, I'm translating. So they're the seven powers. They'll either say of Catholicism or of Oricha. And they took seven of the most powerful of these Oricha. There's actually like 20 of them. And they're interwoven so deftly with the saints that many of their art shows one side the Oricha, the other side the Catholic saint. They're interwoven. And so one example, and this a word for that is called syncretism. That is actually an official word you can look up, and it's what is used to describe the practice of maintaining a cultural history by subsuming it into another one. And that's what happened here. So an example I'm providing for you is the bomba traditional dance in Puerto Rico and Santeria in Cuba. They're examples of things that are brought from the Oricha specifically. And it's also, in addition to preserving this history that would have otherwise been lost, it also leaves us with a connection to the ancestors of the African roots. And I was not aware. I will say to you, it's only recently, in the last few years, that I have actually seen some African religious rituals, and I was like shocked because they're so similar. So what you're looking at here looks very much the same, all of it, yes? They're all different. So this right here is an African ritual of the Oricha with initiates for their religion. In the top here, you're looking at older from the earlier 1900s, people in, and this is Cuba, dancing traditional dances here. And in the bottom, you're looking at a modern rendition of the bomba dance in Puerto Rico. But look how similar. And if I should have done music, that would have been amazing, right? If I had done music for you, you would have seen the movements even are the same. And I will say to you, I'm shocked because some of these are movements that they're things I was taught from the time I was young. We salute the drummer to start the dance, to open the ceremony. We salute the drummer to close the dance, to close the ceremony. If you're going to close your dance, it's one salute. If you're closing the entire ceremony, it's a different one. Those are identical. Those rituals are the same exact thing that they do in their ritual ceremony for the Oricha. I had no idea. I didn't know that. When we have dance, usually for me, if I'm by the ocean, if I go home, I have to go and greet the ocean. And there is a ritual I always saw my mom, my aunts, my family do. It comes from the ritual of the Oricha. And it's almost when I learned of this, it was almost like scary to me because I didn't know that I was perpetuating a history that was centuries old. And I was now part of a story that I didn't know I was a part of. And I think there's a lot of things in our life that are like that. So I'm sharing with you this example. So here, these are just a few depictions. And this was me, full honesty, this was me playing with Chat GPT. I gave Chat GPT, I gave it a bunch of different information about um the Oricha and about um Cuban and Puerto Rican history. And I said, can you give me an original depiction of a couple different things? So what I asked was Chango and Santa Barbara, or in English, I'm sorry, Chango and Saint Barbara. This is the same person, depending on who you ask. And it wouldn't seem that that's possible because they look so different. But the spiritual elements that they embody or that they could bring you guidance for are the same. So when your colonizer says to you, you have to only pray to the saints. Oh, yes, I'm going to pray to Saint Barbara. But you know that behind Saint Barbara is Chango. And the same here. This one is hold on, I forget them. I think this is Oshun and the Virgin of the Mercedes. I have a harder time to translate them. Sorry, of La Mercedes. And I'm wrong. Yeah, and this is. Let me get my cheat sheet because I don't wish to tell you wrong. Apologies. So this is Obatala and the Virgin of the Mercies. This one here is actually Saint John the Baptist here with Osun. So whenever people were praying to Saint John the Baptist, they're all, the characteristics that any Catholic would immediately identify with Saint John the Baptist are also the ones that are this Oricha is known through storytelling to be imbued with. This is Saint Francis of Assisi, and he's with Orula, and the same, they're shepherds, both of them. And so you're seeing the same, that's why I say the dualistic nature, because you could invoke either one of them and you're invoking the same spirituality in so many of these cultures. that was just a page I was supposed to delete. And so then this is my last slide I had for you. So the Afro-Caribbean dances, what they're doing for us, this is just one little way I want to show you of preserving ancestral narratives. Our cultures are more resilient for our ability to tell stories. And the beauty of because people like to say often history is told by the winners. And yes, I don't disagree, but I think if we listen to what CJ is saying, oh, but if you just look, you'll also find the other stories. They're there to be heard if we but listen. So that just a little bit I wanted to share with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Maritza. That was wonderful. So folks, any questions or comments? So one thing I want to give you as a analogy. What happens, everybody knows that India has all these thousands and thousands of gods. The question is, how did that come to be? And actually, the way it came to be is that as Hinduism spread, Hinduism comes from these nomadic people from Central Asia, and they bring Hinduism with them, including the main deities, which is Brahma, which is the creator, Vishnu, who is the sustainer, and Shiva, who is the destroyer and transformer. These were the main deities of the Hindu religion. And whenever they encountered a tribe, the tribe had its own gods. And they incorporated the gods, saying that, oh, this one is the incarnation of Vishnu. This one is the incarnation of Shiva. So they keep their entire stories, the worship, as is. And at the same time, they become part of this larger picture. And it also explores the depth of these concepts. So it kind of spread like that. It was a peaceful way of spreading, because it was not like they would say, okay, you have to take these gods, you have to give up these gods. It was that the idea of incarnation was used to kind of integrate cultures. So it gives rise to tremendous richness of the traditions and maintenance of the traditions. All right. Any questions for Maritza? Any comments for Maritza? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to comment or ask a question. Otherwise, we'll have plenty of time afterwards too. Anybody wants to present? Jeannie, go ahead. Can you please unmute?
I wanted to ask, isn't voodoo part of the Caribbean and the African tradition? And I mean, I was wondering just offhand if you might be participating in something that you didn't even understand. I mean, I guess we are, in a way. We participate in things we don't understand or really have a full understanding of. So if you were doing a dance and it had some voodoo in it that maybe had some power of doing something, I mean, I'm just wondering, is it always a good idea to try to I guess I'm saying accept. I guess that's really what I'm saying. Can you accept everything that is in the story that you're passing on?
So that's a fascinating question. I did not intend to make any commentary on whether or not one should go and seek out these things. I was looking at it more from the perspective of an insider. in so much as, bomba is something in Puerto Rico, you dance as a child. You dance bomba, you have the pretty skirts, you're flouncing about on the beach. It's what we do. And what I'm learning as I look with more intent is that the story there exists that's deeper than and richer than I could have imagined. But it's not about the ritual. So what's been preserved is the fact that there was something more than just what exists today. And that would never have been preserved had they not been able to preserve it. So many, many generations of ancestors before me could not have ever openly said that there were any ties to this dance and to an old back in the day African ritual. I am fortunate to live in modern times, and I can say this without fear of, persecution or death. They could not. If there had not been the outlet of the dancing to remember, the story would have been lost forever. I will tell you, the story is a large percent of it lost because I didn't know. I thought that was our old folk. I really thought it came from the country, old folk dancing. And technically, yes, it does, but there's a deeper story underneath that. And so this is not saying that you should go and attempt to go try out a voodoo ceremony so that you can gain a deeper story. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there exists. So the story of voodoo is many layered. The story of, and so just to answer your first question, yes, if you look to Trinidad and Tobago, that's where you can find some of the different layered stories of how voodoo and voodoo came to be in this hemisphere. But the idea here to focus on is not that we should be looking at these alternative religions. It's that there are so many stories that exist even in something that we might perceive as simply a dance.
Thank you, Maritza. Anybody else has any comments or questions? And then does anybody else have any presentations on anything connected with this topic, anything that you would like to say? Even if you don't have a prepared presentation, you can go ahead and talk about your thoughts about the role of stories in our lives. Judy, go ahead.
I don't have a presentation prepared, and I apologize, but I do have a video, but I don't know how to put it on the screen. So I'll just post the video link right now.
Okay.
And whoever wants to see it later can see it. But what I wanted to say was that about 5-6 years ago, I was inspired by a story that I heard from my mother about a little statue that her grandfather brought from Cuba to Panama in the late 1800s. And that little story of this voyage of my great-grandfather coming to Panama without any money, he was 18 years old, looking for a future, inspired me to the point of writing about it and doing some research about it and studying not just where he came from, but where the statue, the story, the myth of the statue came from. And I'm still writing about it. It's just like it absorbed me to a point where I wrote vignettes and I wrote about every single thing that you can imagine about my family and my ancestors and the story of the statue and where it came from and the archetype and the symbol and what it meant. And I wrote videos and I made videos and I took photos and I went to seminars, and it was just absorbing to the point where I'm still thinking about it. But So, and basically what TJ said about the voyage to the other, when he said that in his presentation, that's what I felt, that I voyaged to this other world that I would have never, ever, ever been interested in if that little story wouldn't have inspired me to do so. So that's basically what I wanted to say, but there's a couple of things that I could read to and basically the myth is called I wrote a myth. It's like a mythical story. And I wanted to quote Karen Armstrong, which wrote the book, A Short History of Myth. And she says, myths provide narratives that remind us what it means to be human. They explore our desires, our fears, our longings. They are stories of belief in the future and reflect upon our consciousness of mortality. They are at the core of every civilization. They are universal and timeless. They shape our lives. We invent stories that evoke us to live our lives in a larger setting that reveal an underlying pattern and give us a sense that against all the depressing and chaotic evidence to the contrary, life has meaning and value. So for me, this myth that I wrote gave me meaning and value. It really did. So the name of the story is Buscando Caridad. Buscando means searching for, and Caridad is the name of the little statue that was found by 500 years ago. This is the story. By 500 years ago, there were three little boys looking for salt in the waters of Cuba, and they were confronted by a hurricane and they almost drowned. But this little statue appeared and saved them, so from the waters of drowning. So they went back, and they were very close to a little town called Santiago de Cuba. And so they gave this little statue to the priest there, and they opened a church in honor of saving those three boys, and it saved a lot of other people from then on 500 years ago. So today, this little statue has become the mother of Cuba since many years ago, the Caridad del Cobre, the Virgin of the Charity of Brown Copper. But it's not really Caridad is not charity. Caridad is the name, of like Judy. It's a name. Caridad del Cobre. So Caridad del Cobre is, so searching for Caridad is searching for the statue. It's not for, so when I became obsessed, and I searched everywhere for the archetypes of the statues, and I did, as I said, my journey began then. I'll read a little bit more about it. So I made this story up with these names. So part of it is true, part of it is fiction. Part of it is story that my mother told me and that I found out about with other people of my family. And part of it I just made it up. So I make up these names, and so I never write in like I or anything like that. So Rita is one of the characters. Rita pledges to continue her search of the statue's memory in Miami. So I go from Panama in the 1800s to when Rita goes back to Panama like 50 years later, and she looks for the statue, or she thought that it was. She didn't find it. She searches all over Panama. She can't find it. Then she comes to Miami, and then she couldn't find it here either, and on and on and on. So she syncretizes the statue's meaning and energy into its archetype and symbolic representation. Evolution of an art motif as observed in various genres such as sacred art, literary art, and more. An explosion of the icon. Finding Caridad through the arts. Caridad is an art motif. It unifies, communicates, evolves, and inspires. And the rest of the story continues with that background. So that's basically what I wanted to say. And I'm posting a YouTube link. Like if anybody wants to go and it's a 5-minute long of a visual journal that I made in honor of this Caridad symbol. That's basically what I wanted.
Judy, is it okay if I play it right now?
Sure, it's 5 minutes long though. You might want to.
That's fine. Let me go ahead. Give me just a second.
This is a visual. Can you do it? Can you, I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
give me just a second. I'm going to just okay,
Yes.
hold on. I'm going
Everything's in
to
Spanish though.
that's okay. You can let people let them see what I'm thinking is let them see the video and then you can talk about it. Is that okay? Thank you. Thank you so much. Give me just a second. Let me bring that up. Let me see what happened to my, okay, just a second. Folks, give me a second. I'm just setting it up. There it is. Share sound. Google Chrome. Okay, there it is. Share. All right.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, let me get started here.
¿Quién dice que no duelen las huellas en la arena? Tu huella el mar se la llevó, pero la luna sigue ahí. Pero esa luna es mi condena. Despacio en la mañana, a gritos por la noche. Las voces vivas del recuerdo se disfrazan de intuición y en una voz tu voz se esconde. Y en una voz tu voz se esconde. Y yo sé que tal vez tú nunca escuches mi canción, yo sé. Y yo sé que tal vez te siga usando así, robándote mi inspiración. Mientras siga viendo tu cara en la cara de la luna, mientras siga escuchando tu voz entre las olas, entre la espuma, mientras tenga que cambiar la radio de estación, porque cada canción me hable de ti, de ti, de ti, me hable de ti. La vida se me esconde detrás de una promesa sin cumplir. De donde nace alguna inspiración, de donde nace otra canción, y ya no sé bien quién se esconde. Yo ya no sé lo que se esconde. Y yo sé que tal vez tú nunca escuches mi canción, yo sé. Y yo sé que tal vez te siga usando a ti, robándote mi inspiración. Mientras siga viendo tu cara en la cara de la luna, mientras siga escuchando tu voz entre las olas, entre la espuma, mientras tenga que cambiar la radio de estación, porque cada canción me hable de ti, de ti, de ti. Ay, mientras siga viendo tu cara en la cara de la luna, mientras siga escuchando tu voz entre las olas, entre la espuma, mientras tenga que cambiar la radio de estación, porque cada canción me hable de ti, de ti, de ti. Yo seguiré buscando o seguiré escapando, tal vez de ti, tal vez de mí. Yo seguiré buscándole una explicación a esta canción. Mientras siga viendo tu cara en la cara de la luna, mientras siga escuchando ti, de ti, de ti. Ay, mientras siga viendo tu cara en la cara de la luna, mientras siga escuchando tu voz entre las olas, entre la espuma, mientras tenga que cambiar la radio, la estación, porque cada canción me hable de ti, de ti, de ti. Me hable de ti, me hable de ti, de ti, me hable de ti. Ay, 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 ay. ¿Quién dice que no duelen las huellas en la arena? Tu huella el mar se la llevó, pero la luna sigue ahí, pero esa luna es mi condena. Despacio en la mañana, a gritos por la noche, las voces vivas del recuerdo se disfrazan de intuición y en una voz tu voz se esconde. Y en una voz tu voz se esconde. Y yo sé que tal vez tú nunca escuches mi canción, yo sé. Y yo sé que tal vez te siga usando así.
Yeah, that's the end.
Wow. Wow. All right. Okay. So, Shuri, I am so grateful for you sharing this with us.
Thank you.
Folks, first, any questions, any comments? I mean, this is so incredible. This is all. I mean, see what happens is that this is what it is. This is what human beings are capable of. When you actually love something, and you get really interested in it, you just put everything in it, and it's not just passive absorption of the material. You organize it, you actually give it expression. Say, okay, these images put together, this text put together with images, taking it from so many different angles. I really love this entire collage, because actually most people tell a story which is like a line, short story that goes like this. But what you showed is actually what is behind the story, because the important stories actually live through lives of people, and each person communes with the story in their own way, expresses it in their own lives. They have their own expression of the story, both visual, in music, and in storytelling. And it is we looked at Owen Barfield. He talks about this felt transformation of consciousness, where this is an opportunity to actually see a different way of being, different way of using your mind, different sensibility from an earlier time. And you kind of have to do what you have done in order to connect with it, not at a superficial level, but very deeply. So, I mean, I'm just very, very grateful for sharing this with us. But anybody else wants to comment, please do so. Comments, questions? Jeannie, go ahead. Jeannie, please unmute.
Judy, could you please tell the story you know, again, in maybe different words, how it goes.
Okay. The story begins, and I'll just read a little chapter that will it says, from Santiago de Cuba to Cristobal, Panama, 1899. Legend has it that La Virgen de la Caridad del Cobre, the name of the statue, saved 3 young boys from the ravages of the sea nearly 500 years ago. A small statue appeared floating close to the boys' small boat, which was in peril, and through a miracle, saved them from drowning off the coast of Santiago, Cuba. This small statue of Caridad, a copper skin icon dressed in a golden threaded draped triangular inverted shaped dress, is always depicted with 3 young boys at her feet, a white boy, a mestizo, and a black slave, all looking up to her for protection. Caridad became the icon which Rita's great-grandfather, Nono, carried with him in the form of a statue to protect him in 1899 when he traveled with 2 friends when he left Santiago on a boat in their pilgrim into their unknown future. In 2019, more than 100 years later, Rita became obsessed with the icon. So the story begins there. When
I know
Rita,
this story. I've heard this story. But I mean, you know, I wouldn't have hardly recognized it.
yeah. Oh, you have heard it?
I
Uh-huh.
have heard it.
Yeah, the legend is pretty famous because it's like, you know, all these saints that become icons in their countries. Different countries have different saints, but this one is a brown-faced saint, but she was venerated before the Catholics and the Christians came to Cuba 500 years ago. She was venerated in Africa. And so it's a story. It was that goes way back.
Mhm.
Always for protection, always for many protection.
Mhm.
Yeah. People take
Marissa, what do you think?
different journeys, you know. I'm sorry.
Marissa, your comments.
Oh, that was just, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It was amazing. I am fascinated. You know, I've heard, I know of, you know, La Virgen de Caridad de Caribe, but to see that story that way is fascinating. And I love the, like Shikat said, the way that it's just this, like it looks like a love story to an entire like span of stories. Like you've just conglomerated so many things. It's just beautifully done. I love the searching, the you're telling the story through searching, and what you find is a bunch of different stories. I think it's super cool. And the and you actually brought it out. It's just kind of fascinating that, you know, we have a little bit of interweaving here, because I didn't have as one of the images Oshun, um, but just only because, you know, what's funny is I thought most people won't know who Caridad de Caribe is. So I won't put it. I'm gonna put, you know, Saint Francis of Assisi. More people will know. And so I was trying to think of the saints like Santa Barbara. I think maybe those are more popular. So it's amazing that you put that. But you know, that's the embodiment of what I was saying, is that we, like, a saint gets this, like you were saying, she's always, there's a couple, no matter how much the image changes, there's always elements that are the same. And
Mhm.
that's the same when you look at like other aspects. I think that's the glue, like how the story is pulled through and pulled forward. And with yours, I really love the handwriting, the handwritten
Yeah.
notes. It just shows, it shows us that you're just, you know, as you're searching, you're just writing things to remember them. And then you went and you put them together as a labor of love. It's amazing. And you know, let's not forget that you also took, you know, you took so many different elements that we've discussed here. She took the aura, because she's going and asking people to give her these little stories, and then you wrote them, and then you made collages and you added images to make the story, but then you also transposed it digitally. So now we all have this digital representation, which then you made it even better because you added it to music. And so I'm just fascinated, the whole process. You've now created this story of stories that is somehow more than any one of those pages could be by themselves. And it's just beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I loved seeing it. Loved
you.
it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. This is just so wonderful. I mean, the thing is, like, I know that almost everybody who really loves something ends up doing things like this. Okay, like, because what ends up happening is that you just like it so much that you collect so much, you work on it so much. But I really like the point that Maritza made, is that I think it's really great kind of setting it, converting it into a video, 5-minute video, because it just shows the work. And I was just going through it like minute by minute, and it was like, what? Wow, and that too. And each of them is like throwing a different light, because the story is so rich that you can use like newspaper pictures, and you can get art, different artistic variations, and each of them is just throwing different light on it. So thank you so much, really.
Thank you. It's just amazing how one story can explode in the minds of so many hundreds and thousands of people, because I mean it's still ongoing. And for that one little story, there's a million other stories that you can relate to that are doing the same thing. So I think that TJ was so right when he said about that there's wonder and there's wisdom in all these things, and it's beyond us. The stories are beyond us.
Yes, it's like a seed, it's like
Mhm.
a seed which goes in your mind, and it grows by itself, and it will produce so many different seeds in you and people around you. And a great story has that characteristic,
Mhm.
that it has seed. Like there are things which are dead, and there are things that are alive. These stories like this are alive, and they're alive because depending on the soil, they will produce different things in different, and they would just keep producing more and more. So thank you so much. All right, next up is going to be Katie, and then we'll go to Mona. Katie, go ahead.
Yes, I definitely see that with people, for example, wanting to read the Bible and then watch like a movie to see the visual scenery to help experience the story a little bit more strongly. But I wanted to go back to this idea of nonfiction to fiction. And I think I think it would be, I don't think it goes, I think it goes black and white from nonfiction to fiction, but it goes from nonfiction to people writing, for example, a biographer writing about someone's life, and they kind of focus on what they're interested in their life story. So you kind of, I'm always, for me, I find it liberating that it's hard to really pin down what was the truth of somebody's life story. Like even Jesus, we had people come here and we're talking about this gospel said this, and this one said this, and this one said this. Why are they inconsistent? We're trying to figure out, what's the truth for me. But I find that kind of liberating, that at the end of the day, your life is your life and it's yours, and the true accuracy is in your life, rather than worrying what's going to happen later at some point.
Thank you, Katie. Really great observations. I mean, one part of it is that we are kind of infinite beings. We're very complex, actually, each of us. And everything that we do is quite complex. And when we try to capture it with something, it can only do so much. But at the same time, we have to keep trying. We have to keep trying. And as we keep trying, we kind of see this part of it, that part of it, we get it better. And then you realize, oh, no. Because you worked very hard to get it in a certain way, certain other things come to light. So it's a continuous growth process towards the grandeur of what it is that we're talking about. Thank you. Mona, please take your time to share about storytelling and teaching.
Thank you so much, Shrikant. I am a teacher, right? So I can't help it but thinking about it from this perspective. How do we learn? How do we get to the core of the matter? How do we absorb information? For me, teaching is like storytelling. But I just wanted to mention that I found somewhere like a great classification of what is great storytelling. I can't quite separate the story from the storyteller. It's like, who is telling the story? So I found that classification of storytellers between sort of explainers, elucidators, and enchanters. So kind of like a progression on the skill of storytelling where explainers merely give out information. So that could be a way of telling a story where you're just basically revealing facts. Elucidators go beyond that because they explain the connections between things so that it helps towards understanding. So it's just not merely absorbing information, but moving towards understanding. But enchanters take it to yet another level where they inspire you, where you get to feel it in yourself. And that's, I think, where the greatest teachers live. Teachers like Jesus or Buddha, or they taught through storytelling. They taught through parables. Like if you read all these sutras, like the ones that give you information are not the ones that touch your heart. The ones that touch your hearts are the ones that give you a story, like the parable of the I don't know. I just wanted to say one right now, and then it's in my mind. But there's just so many stories that are transformative because we recognize them. We recognize it in ourselves when we hear them, that there's truth there. And it's not because somebody tells us that's true, but because it just awakens something in us. So I think that I really enjoy this connection and not separating the story from the storyteller, because that adds to the mystique and to the charm, like that opens in us true understanding and revelation. And that's what I wanted to say. I just can't stop thinking about all those the sutra. I'm a Buddhist, so I read like a lot of, say, Lotus Sutra. It's full of stories, full of stories, full of stories. So it's like, how can you possibly understand unless it was given to you, unless the truth was revealed somewhat indirectly? Because if it's told directly, you won't see it. But if it's kind of revealed like this, where you discover it yourself, and that's a whole nother matter. So I wanted to say that this is how I sort of aspire to teach my classes. Not that I would be sort of a great teacher like that, but then everything can be a story where the students can sort of discover themselves what it is to be known.
Wow. Great comment. Thank you, Mona. So I want to build on that. I want to just use a parable, and then we can talk about the parables and what is it that parable does, because parable is a story. And Mona compared a story, a parable, to an informational statement. and let's see the difference. And let's talk about it. There are a couple of things. One, she talked about the power of the parable, power of the story. And she also talked about how a storyteller engages it. Whether you are an enchanter or whether you're just a reader, there is a difference in that. And we will also look at the other side. So the ideal parable that I found is the parable of the seed and the sower. So let's look at this one. So it says, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow, but when the sun came, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seeds fell amongst thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Okay, so I think great stories are like this seeds which have the capacity. So I think there are two things here. There are different kinds of seeds and there are different kinds of soils. There are seeds that can grow, that can be very, very little, like a mustard seed, that can produce giant trees. And there are things that appear to be seeds, which just are rocks. They're not going anywhere, no matter what the soil is. But when you have the combination of a good seed, a good story, and a fertile soil, the enchanter who is able to do that, then even the seeds morph. They turn into different kinds of seeds because all the seeds that are there kind of combine with each other. Part of it is true, part of it is imagined. So it's not just combination of given seeds. It is saying, what seed can this go with? What else can I make that connects with this? And what can grow from it? And this is a core part of the culture of how human beings have done what they have done, both physically, spiritually, mentally, in every way. So thank you, Mona. Any comments? One last point about this teaching is very closely connected here. It is, if you look at story is actually contained. It is people doing things. So you are illustrating what it means to be moral. It is, the story has an underpinning philosophy behind it. What kind of world are we living in? Story has that implicitly. It doesn't explicitly tell you, but it is there implicitly. How do you think about things? What is the epistemology? It is contained there. What's the right thing to do? What's a good person? There is a dramatization of ethics. What is a proper way of interacting with each other? There is a dramatization of politics or social relations. And there is certainly a dramatization of aesthetics. What is beautiful? And the story, each story in its own way, is actually showing you all these things behind. And which stories you respond to is actually telling you what what you are. So it is telling you about yourself. Just like you're learning about the story, you're also learning about yourself. Marissa. Unmute, please.
It didn't work the first time. Sorry. I really like and what Mona was describing. I like the idea that the next level of storytelling is to internalize the story. And I think we saw that with Judy. Even it's like the story of Calidad de Caribe. That story existed long before the story of Judy existed. But in her quest, she made the story her own. So now there exists in universe a story where the two are interwoven. And I think that it's the idea of, we look as comprehensivists, we're seeking to go, more deeply and more broadly, broadly, is that a word? Probably not. But that's like a beautiful example. And what Mona described, I think, is like that when you're trying to make up your own, when you heard something and it's yet another way of synthesizing. And so I think that's a really neat aspect of story that comes out here that makes it a richer meaning for us. And one more thing, if I may, you were talking about parable, and what came to mind for me is the parable of the sower. I don't know if everyone is familiar with that. It is actually a fiction novel, but it's an author who stands out in that she's somebody who was a, a, a minority science fiction author in a world before that was a story that was common, right? So she was and she wrote about post-apocalyptic Earth. But the neat thing about her stories that make her fascinating is that she writes tales that they show to you a future that is the story we are writing if we continue down a certain path. And she does it brilliantly, first of all. But it's fascinating. So the parable of the sower, in that there's a woman who's she's living in a world where she can feel the pain of others, and she's displaced from her home, and she starts on this journey, and she's learning about different things, and she's telling a story. And what ends up happening, what she learns about, is how they got to there, but it's interwoven. And to me, the idea of parable is, it's that they're almost like, it's funny because it's fiction, right? But it's also a potential looking glass of a nonfiction that hasn't yet happened, if that makes sense. And so that I see that in a lot of parables. It's like they're all fiction, but they're not. Fiction's not the right word for them, right? Because every parable that you see, it's like, this could be our potentiality if we don't follow the right ethics or the right values or the right path. And it's fascinating, all the different shapes and sizes that a story can wear. And we affect stories. It's the way we approach life and our lives. And CJ said something else in this in the when he was discussing this essay about how we think we're going about writing our own story, and that it's not affecting anyone, or really it doesn't really matter, if today I didn't do this, that, or the third. But he mentioned that because there's so many interconnections with stories, we don't know what aspects of our story are going to affect someone else's story. So we might be the catalyst that changes the world. And this is obviously not his words, I'm paraphrasing. But he said something along the lines of, so many people believe that one person can't change the world. And I hear echoes of, Buckminster Fuller, the trim tab aspect in what he was saying about how, you know, we would be well invested to, to remember that our story, it just might have this lasting power that you could never have dreamed of. If we were to consider that the, the lady, Caridad, when she was rescuing those children from the water, maybe she never knew that she would be immemorialized. She just, this was an instinct for her to rescue these children. And now she's centuries later, she's immemorialized in this like, beautiful video. I think that's kind of neat.
Wonderful. I mean, there's just so rich, this entire discussion. It's like each person is bringing up so many different aspects. So please keep it coming. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand if you would like to speak. Jeannie.
What I think is nice about the parable is it exists on a lot of levels. So you could use something like that even if you're a young child, or in different ways, you could use it. But I wanted to bring up something. I was mortified at what I said, and it was about I had a knee-jerk reaction to the word voodoo, and I wish you'd called me on it, Maritza, instead of just saying, well, you don't have to, be in voodoo, because voodoo is just another way of thinking of the world. And it's that I don't know enough about voodoo, rather than, I should be afraid of it. And just to show how true that would be is look at a story like, Cinderella, or, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves with, the poison apple. And I mean, we have so many stories of evil that we perpetuate on little children, and, yet they seem to survive that. Is it a good thing or bad thing? And, do you want to show children violence? And that's maybe a whole nother meetup. But it's just that sometimes the story can be a very frightening thing, and yet can be very beneficial to us, I think.
Thank you, Jeannie. All right, so let's see here. We're about half an hour away. I mean, there are so many interesting themes that have been put on the table here, but I want to start with something that Jeannie started out with, and that is, what is your story? I think in some ways, that's a very fundamental question for each of us, because we kind of think that this is our story, and it's not necessarily so. It's like, many people kind of lock themselves into something and never really question it. So in that sense, exposing yourself to other stories, let's say, okay, what is my story? Is this really my story? Because, like, we studied Jordan Peterson in his Maps of Meaning. Now, you always have a starting point, and then you have a path that you're following, and you're going somewhere. There is a final cause, there is an efficient cause, there is a formal cause, there is a structure to it, there is a starting point. And there is a lot more variation in all of these than most of us think. And stories allow us. Stories in some ways are like simulations. Oh, what if I did that? What would happen? What would be the consequence of this? What would be the result? What would the world be like? What would I be like if I did that? And it allows you to explore this universe of possibilities in a simulation without actually living it. And then you can choose what you want your story to be after doing all this simulation. So it's a really wonderful device, you know. So in that sense, an artist is giving us something very precious. It is a great artist is showing you the human possibilities that lie within you, ones that you may not have noticed. And then the beautiful thing about stories or art is that they speak to you. They really, some of the stories will speak to you. Some of the stories won't. And that itself is telling you something. It is telling you about some things. It is pointing to some patterns which you may not have explicitly identified. Why is it that you like certain kinds of stories? And why is it that you don't like certain kind of stories? So there is just a very rich field of exploration with stories. Any thoughts? Or anything else you would like to say about stories? Maritza.
That's a little bit of a request, actually, because what you're saying now, it it makes me think of something you actually said at the last discussion, and I was hoping you would expand that a little and tie it in. You talked about, so you just brought up Jordan Peterson, and we've just talked about how the maps versus territory, um, and you and CJ had a little bit of interaction on the concept of that being our stories and a way to look at them. I was hoping you might feel inclined to chat a little bit about that again here.
About map and territory? Yeah. Okay. So the beautiful thing about stories is that they're maps. They're maps. And there are so many maps that are possible. But there is territory. There is territory. And there are maps of territory. We don't know the territory, of all the human possibilities. Don't know. We know some things. We don't know a whole bunch. And these maps that are made by different people. So let's take the entire collection of stories. As CJ does, it's like, let's look at the tradition of stories itself. Take all the human stories, from the simplest ones to the most complex ones. From children's stories. By the way, children's stories are amazing. Actually, those children's stories which work, which have survived all this time, are actually saying something very profound, which is not a childlike thing, childish thing at all. It is something very, very deep. So they are simple versions of profound stories. So when you look at the entire collection of stories, these are all kinds of maps. And they are pointing in all kinds of directions because they are based on different worldviews. Okay, all stories don't have the same worldview. They have different worldviews because they're saying, no, the world is like this. Okay, it is a really powerful way of kind of comparing maps as a way, you have to always keep your eye on the territory of the real world and your life. And what the maps are giving you is this massive set of possibilities. And then, of course, great artists look for the dog that did not bark. They say, what is it that has not been done yet? What is it that is missing from all these maps? What is it that is real, which is missing from all these maps? So it is, the other thing is that, again, using a story, Flatland, I like that story very much, because it just shows you the limits of your thinking, of saying that you can always be thinking in this 2-dimension and the world is 3-dimensional, and suddenly some things begin to happen which you have no clue what is happening. You don't see cause and effect at all. You have these things appearing, disappearing, becoming bigger and smaller, unpredictably. So many times, if you carefully listen to a story, a great story, it can show you a dimension that had escaped your notice previously. The world is very rich. Human beings are very rich creatures, very complex creatures. And we tend to explore some things, get good at exploring some things, effective at exploring some things, and don't look at other things. Going back to connecting it with Jung, which we are going to discuss, we're doing on Fridays now, every other Friday. I'm going to have my friend Aidan Moore come over this Friday, and he's going to talk about his experience of Jung. So now let's look at Jung and these maps and meanings. Jung said towards the end of his life is that the core part of his work was done in the Red Book when he was very young, and which was actually these figures, these mandalas, which captured immense richness of things. And one story which remains my favorite writing of Jung, which is called The 7 Sermons to the Dead. Again, it's a story which captures tremendous depth and breadth of Jungian thought in a very simple story which you can read in 30 minutes or 40 minutes. There is another example of just he's an honest person. He says, look, when I was young, I was able to capture this in a story, in these drawings, which it took me my entire life, 60 years, to explicate and work out. So here are some, that was a little bit of expanding. What do you think, Maritza?
No, that's fascinating. I think it's great. When you said it, I was like, I thought it was a fantastic way to describe story in our lives. And I love the idea of, if you forget that the 2-dimensional map is static and that cannot be your only story, oh, you're in trouble, my friend. Like, the territory is alive. It's shifting, it's changing. Even when you think in a city where we have, so many things built, at any time they can come and change the direction of the street. Right. So now your map is no more good if you're looking in a car. And I think that's a fantastic way of doing a sound check for growth for yourself, because, we should constantly be seeking to improve our story or change it or add, as it were, to our story. So I really like the concept of map versus territory as a really easy way to, like, it's like a self-check for ourselves. Are we still, seeking the territory, or are we stuck only looking at the map? That's
I,
really
I want
good.
to build on one thing that you said, that the difference between a static story and a dynamic story. Okay, I think there's a profound difference. Um, you know, at our meetup, in-person meetup, we went through this book by Carol Dweck called Mind Maps, and she distinguishes between mindsets. One, between the growth mindset versus kind of, I don't remember the other name. It's, I think, the static mindset. What happens is that actually, and this absolutely applies to me as well, everybody, to many people, most people, including me, is that actually the world is changing far more than we think it is. Our lives keep changing. Our positions in life keep changing. In the biggest example, recent example is COVID. Who would have thunk? And so much changed. So much changed. I mean, I had not even imagined that something like that could happen. I mean, that was a negative thing. But there are equivalent positive things which can be happening very slowly, but over a period of time, the impact is several times more than COVID. So the world is far more dynamic. And so being able to respond to that, to listen to that, of saying, okay, what is changing? Having the antennas out and being able to change your story, because changing your story means you might have to change your goal, where you're going. You might have to change the path in the trajectory that you're going to go. And you might have to reevaluate where you are. You may think you're here, but maybe you're here. Or you may think you're here, but maybe you're here. And so we can make mistakes about all of these things, and being in conversation with the world. I really like the metaphor of conversation. Okay, I think stories, like most people, when they think of stories, they think of reading a story. Okay, but I don't think that's the fundamental. The fundamental is storytelling. It is, I am telling a story to you, and you're telling a story to me. A conversation where you have the full investment of a person in a story, in what is being said. This is what was there, Mark Stallman calls it the scribal age, where a person is behind his work all the time, and the listener is not a passive listener. He too is participating in the story. So in that sense, what we do here at 52 Living Ideas is in that tradition of going back and forth. We're listening to each other. We're listening to each other's stories. It's not a lecture. Everybody comes and gives what they have when they can. I mean, today, what Judy did was just out of this world. Okay, it was just amazing. It's just like my mind is still going of saying, okay, what wait a minute. What can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? Okay, that's exactly what so many human beings have to offer. But for that, you have to be open to hearing their story. Because like when you want to actually see a person, listen to a person, you have to listen to their story. You have to listen to where they're coming from. Because they're always everybody. So in a sense, story is simply what people are telling. It is a way we are interacting with each other. So it's something very profound, something really at a very base level of being human. Any thoughts? Jeannie, you had something. You're on mute.
I almost left the meeting. Yeah, I did have my presentation. It's
Go for it. Please.
short and kind of simple-minded, but you know,
Go ahead.
whatever.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to make a model of a story. And let me get out my notes what I was gonna say. But I wanted to show it as something knit, which is 3D, rather than a lot of times people talk about weaving a story, but that's only 2D. So here's my story. And then I a shout out to Stoopy, who you know, whose method of
Can you do one thing? Can you move a little bit back so we can see the entire thing together? Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
Okay, so a shout out to Stoopy. Hi, Stoopy. And so each bead would be like a word, and it's very important, you know, which words you choose and how, you know, how you want to make your story. Yeah, I wanted to say this would be like the gestalt whole, you know, that you would see at the end, because you're listening to a story, but you're only listening word by word. And then at the end, you have a kind of gestalt feeling. Then the rows would be sentences, and you string, luckily in English, we can string words together in many different ways. Other languages aren't always like that, but we have many possibilities of making a sentence, even using the same words. And oh yeah, and so yeah, I wanted to say about the words themselves. Sometimes a word, it has a lot of baggage or, you know, meaning, and you have to be careful when you're adding that into your story, whether that's the meaning, you know, and it might have different meanings for different people. And even the word itself can sound in a certain way and bring up an emotion. So that's why words are really important. Then I wanted to start taking this apart and, you know, come to the paragraph. So, you know, then this would be like a paragraph. And then the way you string your paragraphs together, that's important. And I wanted to say, like, this inner part of the paragraph, so much is not even in your words or your sentences. It's in the surrounding, it's in the reading between the lines, all that. There's a lot more that's in something than the things you actually put in it. So once you've strung all your paragraphs together, you end up and your story becomes alive. I don't know if you can see. Okay, well, these are the antennae. So and then your story begins to move through space, and as it moves, it causes these vibrations that are affecting the rest of the world. So it's very important that your story have a good effect in terms of, you know, the vibrations that it's bringing through the world. And it might persist. I mean, some of these stories go on, you know, generations after generations. So it is important what you put in your story.
Wow. Wonderful.
Oh, I don't know about wow there.
No, I like how you can take anything and make a 3D model for it. Wonderful. Anybody else has any comments? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. All right. Okay, so this is wonderful. I thought this was you know, I enjoyed this thoroughly, and I think we're doing a wonderful job with these essays. And it's wonderful to add one more level of essays. I particularly like all the presentations. And because what it does is that it's a way of interacting with the material. Bob, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
I
finally.
had to switch computers. Maybe I'm a little late to the game, but has anybody mentioned fairy tales?
Nobody has mentioned fairy tales until
Oh,
somebody called Bob.
that
The
is
magical
terrible.
Bob appeared, and he's going to tell us a fairy tale. Go ahead. Go ahead, Bob.
I grew up with hundreds of fairy tales, Hans Christian and Andersen, not just fairy tales, but nursery rhymes. I mean, I don't know if I can recite it. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And Humpty Dumpty, the visual is an egg. Well, these are stories that all have meaning, and each one has something profound to say, I think. And I grew up with them, and they influenced me as a kid. And I guess I've forgotten them by now. If I were to go back to these stories, I'm sure that I could learn something. Can I say something about my own experience, which is from earlier in this
Please,
meeting?
please go ahead.
I was thinking of my father was born in 1877, and he participated in World War I. He was a captain in World War I. So after he passed, this suitcase was uncovered, and I discovered all kinds of photos of him in his military outfit, sitting around with his buddies. And these are World War I photos, and they tell a story. And there are dozens of photos, but this story, the story that they tell is unknown. Unlike the fairy tales where you can figure out something and they have meaning, I cannot interpret, or my meaning is subject. Looking at these photos, the story that they tell is going to be different for anyone who were to see these photos. If you were to look at them, oh, you're Shrikant, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, Bob, it would be wonderful to see them. Go ahead.
I can't show them because I don't know where I put them just now. Yeah, okay. It would be. But if I make a point, if you were to look at these photos, the story they would tell to you would be different than what they say to me. And if I have a point, is that the story that they tell is hidden. They're forever hidden. My dad is gone. World War I is difficult to uncover. But there's a story there that you cannot see. And I'm sure that what's his name, CJ Fearnley would have a comment about that. A story which cannot be, which is fiction. Whatever you have to say about it is fictional.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, that's what archaeologists run into all the time. It's even more difficult, when you're looking at a culture so far back. At least with World War I, there is some kind of context that we have. But what archaeologists do is that they find these from so far long ago, and they are trying to piece together, what does that mean? What does this mean? And you have to put together many of these things from many places, and perhaps, connect it to some, written material if it is part of the written culture at all, and try to piece it together. But in any case, you wouldn't, you would get only some things from it, and there will always be a question, of what that is. Again, Owen Barfield, I mean, that what he's saying is that even language itself is like that. When you actually read something written 2,000 years ago, you have to remember that the context there is different. The meanings associated with those words are different. These are different people living in different times, thinking differently. And you have the opportunities, thanks to the mode of language, to try to get maybe some kind of a feeling for what they were like, what that human experience was like.
So true. I think of Shakespeare. He has a number of historical plays, and I wonder how much of these plays tell the story of Shakespeare's time, or do they really tell like Julius Caesar what went on way back then? I wonder.
No, exactly. And but what artists do, again, that's another great thing about stories, that each generation takes the stories of the previous generation and tells them. And some of it is from the original part, but a lot of it is from that particular part. Like, you know, you can look at a quote unquote Greek play, you know, or something based on a Greek story done at a later time, and then you read the Greek play itself, and you find that the feeling is very different, how they think about it. So each culture and each person reinterprets. So we are all storytellers. So we tell the story as best as we can. Listening, with our capacity to listen is limited, our capacity to speak is limited. We have certain strengths, we have certain weaknesses. And so these stories keep getting morphed as they pass through all these different consciousnesses. All right. So Maritza, this was great. Thank you. And thank you, Judy. Thank you, Maritza. Thank you, Bob. And thank you, Jeannie and Mona, for great presentations. And thank you, Katie, for your comments. Appreciate it all. And thanks, Brian. And we will see you soon. I don't think there is a meetup tomorrow, but on Friday, we are doing a meetup on Jung. And then on Saturdays, we have meetup on Asian philosophy. And then on Monday, we're going to do poetry. Maritza, what are we doing on poetry this Monday?
So our Monday, we're actually going to, for the first time, our focus and theme is going to be a quote. So instead of just a word, it's going to be a whole quote. We just tackled we actually tackled an image. So we did a story of an image, which was fantastic. So this time it's going to be a quote, and the featured poet is going to be Lucille Clifton.
Is the
So
quote a secret? Will it be disclosed only at that time, or is it already there on the page?
No, I don't have the quote yet identified.
Okay.
But I need to identify it today or tomorrow so folks can wrap their mind around it before Monday.
Sounds good. All right. Take care. Bye.